He laughed while arresting an old black veteran, until four words stopped him cold. Medal of Honor. Welcome to Wealth and Wounds, where we uncover powerful stories of injustice, resilience, and redemption. If you believe in justice, equality, and truth, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and join us in spreading these untold stories. Now, let's get into today's story. The dusty streets of Greenwood County were unusually quiet that hot afternoon. Sheriff Clayton, a burly man with a wide-brimmed hat and a reputation for arrogance, had just parked his cruiser outside of a small corner store. He spotted an elderly black man sitting on a bench outside, his cane resting across his knees. The man's clothes were worn but neat, his posture upright despite his age. His name was Henry Wallace, 73 years old, a veteran, and a man who carried his dignity like a shield. But to Sheriff Clayton, none of that mattered. "Hey, old man," Clayton barked as he swaggered up to him. "You loitering here? This is private property." Henry raised his eyes, calm but firm. "I'm waiting for my prescription from the pharmacy inside," he said. His voice was steady, measured. Clayton scoffed. "Prescription? Huh? Sure. You people always got an excuse." The sheriff grabbed Henry by the arm and yanked him to his feet. A few townsfolk paused to watch, whispering nervously. Everyone knew Clayton's reputation. If he had a target, you stayed out of the way. "You're under arrest for trespassing," Clayton sneered, twisting Henry's arm behind his back. Gasps rose from the small crowd. An elderly man, handcuffed like a criminal? Henry didn't resist. He stood tall, though his body trembled from years of arthritis. And as he was shoved into the back of the patrol car, a little boy watching from the crowd tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, why are they arresting the soldier?" But no one paid attention. Not yet. At the station, Clayton paraded Henry through the lobby, making sure every deputy and clerk saw. "Got myself a troublemaker," he laughed, as though it were a joke. Henry was placed in a cold metal chair inside an interrogation room. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Clayton leaned across the table, smirking. "You think you could just sit wherever you please? Not in my county. You people ought to know your place by now." Henry looked him square in the eyes. "I fought for this country. I bled for it. I've earned my place." Clayton barked out a laugh. "You? Fought? Don't make me laugh, old man. The only thing you ever fought was probably your own reflection." But Henry said nothing more. He simply sat in silence, his gaze steady, his patience unwavering. Later that evening, as Henry's belongings were being processed, Deputy Maria Lopez, one of the few fair-minded officers in the station, opened his wallet. Tucked inside, next to his ID, was a small, folded certificate and a picture of a young soldier in uniform, shaking hands with the president. She froze. "Sheriff, you might want to see this," she called. Clayton strutted over impatiently, but when his eyes landed on the document, his smirk faltered. It read, "The United States of America presents the Medal of Honor to Sergeant Henry Wallace for acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty." The room fell silent. Every deputy stopped what they were doing. Even the buzzing lights seemed quieter. "Is this real?" Clayton muttered, his arrogance cracking. Henry, still handcuffed, lifted his chin. "Real enough. Korea, 1951. Hill, 931. I was there when half my unit didn't come back. That medal was pinned on me by President Truman himself." The weight of his words hung in the air. And then came the dagger. Henry leaned forward and said calmly, "Son, before you call me a criminal, maybe you should learn what sacrifice looks like." The townsfolk who had seen the arrest earlier began to gather outside the sheriff's office. News spread fast in Greenwood. "Sheriff arrested a Medal of Honor veteran," they whispered. Reporters arrived. Cameras flashed. Inside, Clayton was unraveling. He stammered, "WL, I didn't know. How was I supposed to?" But Henry cut him off. "You didn't care to know. That's the problem." Deputy Lopez, emboldened, stepped forward. "Sheriff, you humiliated a decorated soldier in front of half the town. You owe him an apology, and your badge might not be far behind." The crowd outside grew louder, chanting Henry's name. Veterans arrived, wearing their old caps and jackets, standing in solidarity. The sheriff's arrogance had turned to fear. He had mocked, insulted, and arrested a hero, and now the town wanted justice. As Henry was released from his cuffs, he addressed the sheriff, the deputies, and the crowd outside. I didn't fight for medals. I didn't fight for recognition. I fought so people like him, he pointed to Clayton, would have the freedom to mock me without fear of a dictator's wrath. But freedom comes with responsibility. And when those in power abuse it, we all lose. The crowd erupted in applause. The sheriff's face burned red, not from anger now, but shame. Henry picked up his cane and turned toward the door. But before he left, he paused, and his voice dropped low, carrying the weight of unfinished business. Sheriff, this isn't over. Because the real question isn't what you did to me today, it's what else you've been doing in the dark. The room went still. Clayton's eyes widened. What did Henry know? And with that, Henry walked out into the night, greeted by cheers, leaving behind a sheriff who realized his days of unchecked power were numbered. Respect should never be based on skin color, age, or status. You never know who someone is or what battles they've fought until you've listened to their story. Justice always has a way of surfacing, and arrogance always collapses under truth. As Henry left the station, Deputy Lopez slipped him a note. Her hand shook. Mr. Wallace, you were right. The sheriff has secrets, big ones, and he'll do anything to keep them buried. Henry unfolded the paper under the streetlight. His tired eyes widened as he read the words. Missing evidence, wrongful arrests, a cover-up that goes all the way up. The fight was only beginning. Henry's hand shook, not from fear, but from memory. He had faced bullets on foreign soil, survived nights when death was certain. But corruption at home, the kind that preyed on the innocent, silenced the poor, and destroyed lives, this battle cut deeper than war. The phone rang. It was Lopez. Mr. Wallace, the sheriff has been falsifying reports. Dozens of arrests, all young black men. He plants evidence, coerces confessions. And if anyone gets too close, they disappear. Henry clenched his jaw. Why tell me? Because, she whispered, you're the only one he fears now. The next morning, Henry walked through Greenwood's Main Street. Whispers followed him like shadows. To some, he was a hero. To others, a troublemaker. But everywhere he went, people leaned close and asked in hushed voices. My son, Sheriff Clayton, locked him up for something he didn't do. Can you help? My brother never came home after they arrested him. They said he resisted, but he wasn't that kind of man. Every story piled onto Henry's shoulders. His cane struck the pavement with each step, not just for support, but as a rhythm, a march forward. He realized this wasn't just about his dignity anymore. It was about justice for all of Greenwood. That evening, Henry visited the local church. Pastor Williams, an old friend from childhood, shook his hand with tears in his eyes. Henry, the sheriff's been bleeding this town dry. He finds the poor, jails the young, and silences the brave. But God doesn't put a Medal of Honor in your hand for nothing. Maybe you're meant to fight this battle too. Meanwhile, inside the sheriff's office, Clayton paced like a cornered animal. His pride had been shattered, but worse, Henry Wallace had become the town's symbol of resistance. Lopez is talking, he snarled at his deputies. And that old man thinks he's untouchable. Well, we'll see about that. One deputy hesitated. Sheriff, people are watching him now. Maybe it's best to lay low. Clayton slammed his fist on the desk. I'm a law in Greenwood, and no old soldier's going to take me down. But even as he spoke, fear gnawed at him. He remembered Henry's calm words in the interrogation room. The real question isn't what you did to me today. It's what else you've been doing in the dark. And Clayton knew Henry was coming for the truth. Late one night, Lopez met Henry in the parking lot behind the abandoned courthouse. She handed him a small box filled with documents. These are copies of reports the sheriff buried. Dozens of cases, all young black men. Evidence tampered, statements forged. One case, it's worse than the rest. Henry opened the folder. His eyes froze on the photo of a boy no older than 16. The report claimed he died resisting arrest. But the bruises, the timing, the witnesses, it all pointed to something else. Henry's voice dropped low. This boy, who was he? Lopez swallowed hard. David Carter, the mayor's nephew. Henry's blood ran cold. The sheriff hadn't just been abusing power. He had crossed a line so dangerous it could tear the whole county apart. The next Sunday, Greenwood gathered for a town meeting at the courthouse steps. Mayor Eleanor Carter stood before the crowd, her face pale but resolute. "I've just learned that my own nephew's death was not an accident," she announced, her voice trembling. "It was the result of corruption within this very sheriff's office." Gasps swept through the crowd. Henry, standing with his cane at the front, nodded quietly. Sheriff Clayton shoved through the crowd, red-faced. "This is a setup. Lies. That old man's poisoning your minds." But the people didn't move. Their silence was louder than any accusation. For the first time, Clayton realized he had lost his grip on fear. Henry stepped forward, lifting his voice so all could hear. "We've been silent too long. We've buried too many sons, watched too many lives ruined." The sheriff thought he could mock an old man. But what he didn't know is that old man carried the truth. The crowd roared in agreement. That night, the sheriff made his move. Under cover of darkness, he and two loyal deputies drove out to Henry's small farmhouse on the edge of town. Inside, Henry was waiting. The Medal of Honor glistened under the dim lamp on his table. The documents spread beside it. His cane rested within reach. The door creaked open. Boots stomped across the floor. "End of the line, old man," Clayton growled, pulling his revolver. Henry didn't flinch. He looked the sheriff dead in the eye. "You can kill me, Clayton, but the truth is already out there, and it will bury you." Before the sheriff could answer, headlights flared outside. Dozens of cars pulled up. The townsfolk had come, farmers, pastors, mothers, veterans. At the front was Mayor Carter, her finger pointed at Clayton. "It's over," she declared. The sheriff's hand trembled on the gun. For the first time, power had slipped through his fingers. Corruption thrives in silence, but silence ends when truth finds its voice. Henry Wallace wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for a community that had been silenced too long. And when one voice rises, others follow. The sheriff lowered his gun slowly, his eyes darting around at the crowd that now stood against him. But then, he smirked. "You think this ends tonight?" he hissed. "You don't know who I answer to. This goes way higher than me." The crowd gasped. Henry's cane slipped slightly in his grip. If Clayton wasn't the top of the chain, who was? The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't just watch. Take action. Like this video, share it with a friend, and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Wealth and Wounds for Part 2, because this story is far from finished.